After winning another match, we see Angelica has made it through the preliminaries with 40 wins in a row. Rionette congratulates her, and Angelica mentions that she intends to win her way through the block league matches as well. Rick says that he has to do his best too, and once again Angelica asks him if he intends to compete in 40 matches in 4 days. She clarifies that each venue only hosts 1 bout per day, so that will be impossible for him. After all, there are several dozen sites for the preliminaries across the kingdom, and a distant venue might be 100 kilometers away. Rionette interrupts her, reminding Rick that it's time to go, so he apologizes to Angelica, saying that he has a bout at the Green Hill Arena at 10. She once again loses her cool, as she claims that the Green Hill Arena is 30 kilometers from there, so he could never get there in time even if he took a coach. Rick looks at her like she's crazy when she mentions the coach, saying that he's in a hurry, so he's just going to run. After saying goodbye, Rick immediately disappears, breaking the concrete as he runs at high speed. Angelica is baffled, wondering what happened to her position as someone who uses flickering feet. Rionette asks her if she's interested in Rick's match, and after the blonde confirms this, she carries her in her arms and runs at high speed despite Angelica's horrified screams. Once they finally get there, Angelica couldn't even watch the match, and Rick mentions that he's made a mistake, saying that the third of his 8 secrets of going easy needs a few more adjustments. After all, he left his last opponent buried in the ground, something that clearly crossed the line. Not wasting any time, Rick heads to the next venue, and before Angelica can say anything, Rionette carries her in her arms again, taking her with them. The following days, Angelica is dragged everywhere they go as Rick continues winning matches. In the end, she really can't believe he really won 40 matches in 4 days to make it through the preliminaries, since that utterly defies common sense. Rionette mentions that next will be the block league matches, and Angelica says that not being in the same block as Rick means she's safe. She really wants to win the tournament, but as long as that 40-something is around, it's impossible. Rionette also informs her that Broston will be participating in the Eastern League, explaining that he's the one who taught Rick, an S-rank adventurer. Angelica freaks out, losing more motivation as she hears there's another monster like him competing. Still, even if winning is impossible, she can't lose because of one particular man, though she doesn't give any details about it, quickly changing the topic. She instead asks about Rick, and Rionette tells her that he's out jogging to the Tronia region, 600 kilometers there and back, though Angelica is not even surprised anymore. She's amazed that Rionette can put up with all of that. After all, they're always together, so she would probably hate it if people said that they're in love. Without any hesitation, Rionette says that she wouldn't mind, mentioning that she has a great affection for Rick. Angelica gets a little flustered after hearing that, saying that there's no problem at all then. Just in that moment, a waiter of the restaurant they're in approaches their table, suddenly asking for their help, since they don't have enough part-timers. After that, we see Rick finally returning from his jogging session to the Tronia region and back. A man suddenly approaches him, introducing himself as the chairman of the Western League's management committee, Snape Resurrect. He got to know him because he's now recognized as the fastest qualifier of the Western League preliminaries in history. A man in black suddenly appears, informing Snape that Angelica appears to be absent. Rick asks if he knows Angelica, and Snape admits they're quite close. He's a mere merchant, but the House of Diermuit treats him very kindly. Changing the topic, Rick asks him when he retired from being a pugilist, mentioning that his handshake felt like one from someone who'd trained to fight. Clearly impressed, Snape comments that he definitely lives up to his reputation. It was over 20 years ago, but he did win a little competition. The sense of accomplishment and roar of the crowd were quite uplifting. However, he retired when he was 23 years old, so that ended up being the first and last time he won anything. He mentions that his company has entered someone in this competition, and before leaving he asks Rick to leave his regards to Angelica and to tell her not to get too excited. After that, Rick enters Melicia's inn, and she asks him if he's okay, since he had to speak with Snape from the Dragonaut Company. Rick seems to be clueless, and she tells him that it's fine as long as nothing happened, but he has to be careful. Snape might look like a gentleman, but there are so many rumors that he's connected to the underworld. He's the lead sponsor for the competition this year, and everyone was shocked by that. He remembers Snape told him that his company entered someone in the competition, and Melicia informs him that's the sponsor's slot, explaining they have a slot for a competitor in the tournament. Just then, Rick overhears the conversation between 2 other customers, who talk about the high level of the bunnies this year, especially that newcomer, that dark elf girl. Later, there is advertising for the Western League block, where the main hosts and cheerleaders are Angelica and Rionette, who show off some top-notch bunny outfits. One of the other employees praises Angelica, saying that she's very passionate about the job. However, Angelica is actually really embarrassed, and she clarifies she's not doing this because she wants to. Rionette clarifies that if she hadn't accepted the job, she would have turned it down, but Angelica says that she couldn't turn down someone asking with a blood-covered face. In that moment, a drunk man appears, disturbing the other girl bunnies, but when he approaches Angelica, he mentions she's like a washboard. The next thing we see is the man being slammed against the ground as Angelica steps on him, asking him to leave. Just then, Rick appears and recognizes her, so she gets all flustered, explaining that she had no choice. When he sees Rionette, Rick blushes and spaces out in awe, which leads to Angelica asking why his reaction was so different with her. Later that day, we see the champion's trainer reading the newspaper, which says that Browston has made it through the Eastern League preliminaries in a mere 2 days. Plus, every match was decided by a single knockout blow, something truly unbelievable. Kerwin mentions that Orc is so incredible that the other coverage is minor, but that other man made it through the Western League in 4 days, which makes him think that he'll enjoy the event this year. Here we see some flashbacks from the coach's past, where he just met Kerwin, who had just finished beating up a large number of men. He told him he's not there to kill him, but to scout him, inviting him to Heractopia. In that kingdom, he can obtain whatever he wants by fighting and winning, something that sounded like fun to Kerwin, who accepted the offer. Back to the present, the next day we see Angelica is still mad, and Rick wonders if she's bothered by what happened the day before, clarifying that she also looked cute. Rionette agrees, saying that she was very popular with a portion of the crowd. However, her words don't help very much. Changing the topic, Rick mentions that someone named Snape came to see her, and this makes Angelica freeze. The only thing she says is that she doesn't know anyone like that. Later that day, the Block League competition to decide the tournament participants is about to begin, and only one entrant from each block can participate in the final tournament. In the first match from Block A is Helen Thompson versus Angelica Diarmuid, a fight between 2 women. As Angelica fights her opponent, Rick and Rionette notice that she's somewhat tense, and she's not her usual self, but she still ends up winning her fight. In Rick's match, he again uses the 8 secrets of going easy, which is to pass by and give a knife hand strike, knocking out his opponent as if it were nothing. After a few more fights where both take the victories, Rionette shows them that there are only 4 more bouts left. In order to ensure their participation in the knockouts, they can't lose a single match. It's Angelica's turn, and despite her combination of agility and elemental magic, the damage is not enough to do anything to her opponent, who is quite resistant. When she tries to attack him again, he outspeeds her, having noticed that she is now slower due to fatigue, and gives her a powerful punch that sends her flying. After that blow, the match is over, since Angelica is left unconscious, unable to continue. Once they finish tending to her wounds, she sees that Rick is outside waiting for her, who, seeing that she is fine, tells her that she was too impatient. Her opponent's defensive strength was clear to see, and she knew it wasn't a good match for her style, but she chose to stick to tactics that would tire her out. Angelica just asks him to keep his opinion to himself, acting quite angry for some reason, and then leaving. Rick follows her to try to reason with her, knowing that she could have won that match if she wanted to. He asks her if she has anything to worry about, saying that she can ask him for advice, though he might not be of much help. Angelica stops, saying that he really is a meddler, but smiling and going with him either way. Soon after, she explains that the man who came here the other day, Snape, is her fiancé. Snape has intervened in a number of problems the House of Diarmuid had, and it all started a year ago. Her parents passed away in an accident, and her siblings and her took on the management of the Diarmuid lands. However, they were inexperienced and fell into grave financial difficulties. That's when their Scrooge of a grandfather stepped in and made a deal with Snape, who was probably aiming for a pipeline to nobles and royals. He promised to provide the House of Diarmuid a large sum of money, and he demanded a betrothal to her in return. After that, they desperately rebuilt their finances, but it was too late to nullify the betrothal. Hearing her story, the only thing Rick reacts to is the fact that Snape is her fiancé, completely in disbelief. As he freaks out, Angelica just gets mad at the delay and complains about his ability to process information. At any rate, she mentions she looked into Snape while trying to block the betrothal. When she did, she saw he'd become the main sponsor for this tournament, so now this is her main point. Before she can explain further, they hear a commotion nearby and see a man named Taylor Brids, the one who beat Angelica and who is now arguing with another guy because he is bothering a woman. However, when Taylor tries punching him, the man doesn't even budge, and he returns the blow with more force, immediately knocking him out. Despite seeing how strong the man is, Angelica intervenes, asking him to leave the poor woman alone. This only manages to anger the man further, and he tries to punch her as well, but Rick calmly stops him with one hand, asking him to calm down for a moment. Just then, Snape shows up, asking Geith to leave things at that and restrain himself until the tournament. Once Geith leaves, Snape apologizes for all the trouble, saying that he'll send a compensation at a later date. Rick quickly asks him who that was, and Snape tells him he was Geith Resurrect, and he's his younger brother, though they're far apart in age. He explains Geith gets violent when he's annoyed by a troublesome fly, and as no one is strong enough to stop him, he is troublesome to deal with, but he also calms down quickly. Snape then asks Angelica if she's okay, and she coldly responds that she's fine. Once they leave the place, Rick mentions the fact Snape is becoming the tournament's sponsor and her engagement, wondering what the connection is. Angelica says that the amount exchanged for the betrothal was a significant sum. She looked into the Dragonaut Company assets, and they don't have nearly enough, so he intends to earn it here, through the tournament. Rick says that he's sure there's a ridiculous amount of money at stake in the tournament, and it's possible that Snape is fixing the game. Angelica agrees, explaining that he's going to use the sponsor's slot to fix the outcome of the tournament, and that's why she's going to defeat his entrant and call off this engagement. That's why she became a pugilist. But the competitor in the sponsor's slot is that Geith from before, and even if she makes it into the tournament, she can't beat Geith as she is now. Rick then suddenly asks her if that would happen if he trains her, but Angelica only wonders if she's being notified of her own murder right in this moment. And that's it for this video. If you liked it, then subscribe to support the channel, comment the word engagement to prove that you stayed till the end, since not a lot of people do.